and saved the proper file, the proper renders that we need. So these, basically what you should have in the folder are, oh, I have music playing, hang on, let me pause that. What you should have in the folder looks like this. You should have, if it ever loads, there we go. You should have your round 2 render, and if you guys recall, it looks like this. You can't really see it very well because the lights are on. That was the wrong direction. So you should have one of these, and my architecture totally changed, so it's just like what you're going through, and one of these, right? So the difference being the developed full-scale model is going to have a little bit different of an environment map, an environment setting that's applied to it, and the architecture should be more calibrated. You should see, mullions or doors or or handrails, guardrails, whatever it is that you want to develop for your project. You should have some development in the architecture. This one is just a massing model. You shouldn't really see the glazing. You shouldn't really see the detail of the mullions. It's just about understanding, how big is the thing. And also the environment settings, we kind of left them at the default, okay? So we're showing the progression from one to the next. Does that make sense? It's a little bit difficult to understand because my architecture changed, but you can see the point of view is the same, at least. That's a lot of development from this to this.
Where's the middle? We did have like the first one, the second one, the third one.
For the setup?
You have like the massing model and the semi-development.
Yeah.
And the final.
The final one is what we're working on now. Okay. So we also did, let me pull this up real quick. This is what we did before. So you're going to have an image that shows 3 iterations of, let me pull it up of this. Okay. So feel free to use your image that shows all 3 of these on the board if you wish. But the downside is you're going to have to turn all those settings off, save off an image that's a duplicate, because when you crop it, all those settings are going to be cropped incorrectly. So you'd want to turn those off and crop them differently. But anyway, one of those images is going to go on the board. And then on the other board for the studio scale model, you're going to have this and you're going to have that. Okay, so you're going to have the development from one to the next. Okay, and it might look a little different. You might have changed to the lighting settings. That's totally okay. But the difference here is that since the primary development that we did is the architecture in this one, right? So all we really changed was the architecture. We may have introduced more materials, but it may not make as much sense to use clear glazing in this render. It's okay if you did. But what I opted for was a frosted glazing so that it doesn't distract you by seeing into the model. Okay. So if you're going back to redo it, I would suggest maybe try that out. It might help. But these are going to be put on the board as well. So I mentioned that we're going to look at it here and kind of understand a bit more about what we're doing. So this is a template. So you're going to want to save it. Well, you could save it as a template, but we're only going to use this one twice. So just save it as basically, the one you're setting up now. So I'm going to call this one full scale board. This is not very informative. Not very informative naming conventions. Okay, you might want to save it with like the class name, number, and something like that. I don't know, maybe the date, whatever you find useful. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to immediately save as and make the studio scale board. And I'll open that up for the full scale. So I've got one board for full scale and one board for studio scale. It really is as simple as just dragging these things on. Okay, so I'm on full scale right now, so I'm going to drop the environment image on the board. And remember, these images were not calibrated for the resolution, so it's going to come in large or small. The proportions are going to be a little bit off, so when you hold shift and you scale it down to where you're trying to crop it, you're going to see that it's not wide enough. Okay, or possibly it's too wide and it's not tall enough or something like that. So what you do in that case is just drag it out to the point that you are intending to crop it, which would be here, and then you can crop that like that, okay? So, or hit enter, and then you're going to have to actually do the cropping. The way that I do this is I just rasterize it, and then, well, let's rasterize it first. Rasterize, drag the box to the area that you want to keep, do select inverse, and just hit delete, and that'll get rid of that extra part for you. Okay? In Illustrator, it's actually a little easier to do that stuff. Or rather, InDesign, sorry. So then we just do that for both. And again, I don't really mind so much if a certain one is on the top or bottom. Let's put this here, scale it down to there, and then we can rasterize that, and then just use your selection box, select inverse, delete. Okay? So now they're set up. Just make sure that you get your titles in front of them. Like that. Okay, you can use white text, black text, whichever is appropriate for your particular board and image. Okay, does that make sense? So that's one of them. Okay, the other one is really the same thing. I'll show you it just to make sure it's excruciatingly clear what you need. I did the more developed one on top, right? Yeah. I guess that's an important distinction. I do want them to match, by the way. I don't want you to put like the first week assignment on the top of one board and then on the bottom of the other board. If you're going to put the first week assignment on top, do it on both. Put this other one on here. Rasterize them both. That didn't work. Select inverse, delete. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, what questions do you have? No questions. Okay, so we've got one board like that, the other board like that. And then the renders that I want to see here, we're actually going to render it out a little bit longer. So I think an hour minimum should do. I debated actually bumping it up to 2 hours, but use your best judgment. The quality of the image should be such that the graininess of the image is significantly better than what you did as a draft. So if you render it for 1 hour and it's not better than the draft, then render it for like 2 or 3 hours. Okay. So some of it depends on like what your settings are and which computer you're rendering on. So those of you guys on the laptops, you probably want to use a desktop somewhere. Actually, I don't know. The CPUs might be better on those. Okay. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to come around and keep helping you guys out. You've got everything you need for the assignment, I think. If you have any other questions, just let me know.
It's due at the end of class?
It's not due at the end of class. So like we basically have this whole week that I planned for this assignment. I think at this stage I'm going to move on to the next assignment in the next class, so I'll probably still make this due Monday of next week. Just, you know, to keep up with expectations of the schedule and all that. Okay?
We're going to print it out?
No, not this one. What 2 space?
The large space.
That? Oh. Okay, that's a very good question. In case you guys are curious, if it wasn't super clear, this is the final size of the image you're rendering. Okay? So that's 3300 by 4500. So when you drop your image in, if you do your settings right, it should fit that exactly. You shouldn't have to do any cropping or resizing or anything. Okay? There it is.